church. So in youth group lately, we've been talking about justice and how Jesus utilized justice and sought to bring peace to the poor and the sick and the needy, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, and how he really was a symbol for justice during his time, and how we as Christians and followers of Christ now can use his example of how to seek justice in our own lives, or in his life, to emulate that in our own lives. This sermon series that I've been working on with my kids is called Back to the Future. And it's kind of this idea that Jesus takes our pasts and can mold them and shape them to impact our future. And he can use the things that we, our past mistakes, our past grievances, our past relationships, and he can mold them and use them for his glory in the future. And for young people, it's this very appropriate, like looking forward towards the future, which I love. So we're on the second week of this 4-week series, and I thought that it was particularly impactful of a lesson this week. So I just wanted to give you that today, give you a little taste of what we've been talking about in youth group. And so this second sermon series, the second installment in the sermon series, the big idea is that Jesus can rebuild what has been destroyed. So when Jesus came into the world, people were looking for a Messiah who could rebuild what had been destroyed. They were looking for somebody who could physically rebuild the temple that had been destroyed by the Babylonians, and they were also looking for somebody who could rebuild them spiritually by rebuilding the relationship between between God and God's people. When Jesus began his ministry on earth, he announced that he had come to set people free, physically and spiritually. He announced that he had come to set his people free, and early in Jesus' ministry, he made a shocking and very confusing declaration to the people at the time. So let me read to you John 2, verses 12 through 21. This story might be familiar to you, so find something that you haven't thought of before and kind of be listening in your mind for something new. John 2 says this: After he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples, he stayed there for a few days. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords, and he drove all the people from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins in the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here! Stop turning my Father's house into a market." His disciples remembered what was written. See the past. "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then responded to him, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all of this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it in 3 days." They replied, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days?" But the temple he had spoken of was his body. So what's going on here? Jesus, a faithful Jewish man and teacher, seems to be destroying the temple that God's people held so sacred. At least they said they held it sacred. When Jesus sees what was happening in the temple, he's angered by it. He's angry. You might wonder, so Jesus is mad about selling doves and sheep and goats and exchanging money. So is he mad that this church sells Hooks tickets? Would he be mad if we had a bake sale and we sold cookies? What if we sold pizza? Is that the same thing? Maybe, or maybe not. You see, it wasn't the fact that things were being sold that made Jesus angry. He was angry because the people were being taken advantage of, the poor people, especially those in the most need. They had traveled from far and wide to worship God in this holy house in Jerusalem, and people were taking advantage of that and charging them extra money for things that they could have been buying for much cheaper. Not only were these people who were selling taking advantage of others, but they were doing so in the name of God. So Jesus gets creative by making a homemade whip. He drives out all the animals that were being bought and sold. He flips tables. He makes a real spectacle. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, of course, panic. They can't believe he's being so disruptive. But when they question his authority, Jesus says something both scandalous and confusing. Jesus points to the sacred building from the past and redefines it in the present. He says, this isn't the temple. This, not the temple. I am the temple. So he's making this switch, right? It took them 46 years to build this temple, but he says, I will destroy this temple, meaning his body, and he says, I'll rebuild it in 3 days, which of course we know is his death, crucifixion, and then rising again. So we see this shift in the minds of people when Jesus came to earth, right? Before, they were thinking, oh, this physical temple is the only place where I can come to worship. This is the only way that I'm going to get to heaven. But Jesus comes and he shifts that focus, and he says, no, now you can come to the Father through me, through spiritual acts only. You're not bound to coming to this temple to worship me and to be my follower. He says, in the past, like in the Old Testament, the temple was the place where people could connect with God. And in the future, Jesus was declaring that he would be the source of connection between God and humankind, which we see played out. So although the authors of the Old Testament didn't know what God had in store through Jesus, they did know that God had a plan to rebuild what had been destroyed. So you can hear their hopefulness in these words from the past. So I'm going to read to you from Psalm 147, verses 1 through 3. Notice the hopefulness in these words. This is a Psalm of David. How good is it to sing your praises to our God? How pleasant and fitting it is to praise him. The Lord builds up Jerusalem. He gathers the exiles of Israel. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Jesus didn't come to rebuild a building that could one day be destroyed again. He came to rebuild our broken connection with God. He came to tear down the systems of injustice so a more just world could be created. Jesus came to rebuild what had been destroyed. So thanks for joining me for the devotional today. I appreciate your time. So as you go into the rest of your week and the rest of your day, may you have a blessed one, and may you remember that God will always be with you and that we have a connection through God, through Jesus Christ. Have a good one.